To Equal Time Soccer. I'm Matt Pravratsky here with Dani Foxhoven Young. Danny, I'm trying to bring a little bit of luck to the Gophers today I am in Hubbard County, which is where Mark and I grew up. We've played hundreds of low talent soccer games in Hubbard County. And so I'm up north. We were talking before recording. This is a beautiful painting my grandmother painted. We're trying to add every element of like familial luck to this
I love
game.
it.
So we're coming in. For those who did not tune in, we'll do a little bit of a recap. So Thursday, the Gophers were first regular season game. They were at Baylor, a quality, Power 5 opponent. They came away with a draw, which on paper I don't think people would have been necessarily upset with. But the way the game went, they had a lead late and then they gave up a goal, so some crucial points got dropped. But they're coming in facing TCU, who is a top-ranked team, and we'll get a little more into that later on. But first, just to recap the Baylor match for folks, Danny, I want you to talk a little bit. The Gophers had that late lead super late, really just sort of a defensive misstep, a combination of maybe, the midfielders didn't rotate and the back line kind of had a little bit of a flub. You give up a goal, you drop, you come away with 1 point when you really had 3 right in your hand. But then that's the first game of a weekend, and then you have to play again 2 days later against the top team. Talk about, both for players and for the coaches, how do you sort of, accept the fact that you did give up points and like we don't want to be satisfied, but then also you need to just immediately refocus to an even tougher game on Sunday.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things to this that I'm sure are going through everybody's minds right now. One is, you kind of have to give a little bit of grace to everybody because it is the first game of the season and, mistakes are going to happen.
Right.
Experiments are going to be made. Things are going to be tried that fail, right? So in the 4-4-2 is something we talked about before where you mentioned it, where the midfield didn't shift. That's kind of the challenge with the 4-4-2. So getting used to that is going to be something that we will see throughout the whole season. I think it was a little bit exploited in this last game, but that's okay. It happens. It was game 1. So there's a little bit of grace there. Having said that, these early games and games that are non-conference with challenging teams are the ones that really actually affect your RPI later in the season. So you said it, those points are really important. And I'm sure that later in the season, when push comes to shove and, all of the rankings start coming out and people start, falling in their place, maybe this is one they would want back. So, we'll see how that plays out. Having said that, I think overall, a tie is not the worst thing. They came out with a point.
Right.
They know that they played really well for the majority of the game. Obviously giving up a late goal is never the way that you want it to be. But, like we said, it happens. So I think taking that kind of energy into this game and knowing, if we would have just cleaned things up come the late part of the game, we could have come away with a win. Maybe they're taking that, I hope that Aaron is bringing that mentality into this game and saying like, we did all of the right things. Mistakes happen, that's okay, but let's continue to focus on the right things for this game because this opponent is going to be a little bit more challenging. If we make mistakes, they will for sure be exploited here, right? So it's kind of like we got to tighten those things up and stick to what we know is working.
Right. And like you said, the stakes are so much higher today, and so you do have to you both have to carry that motivation, and then also you really have to be so diligent. Talking about the things that went well against Baylor, like you mentioned, fairly even run of play. Baylor walked away with an XG of 1.28. Minnesota had 0.9, so maybe a draw feels like roughly correct. I do think one thing that it probably undersells is Minnesota looked a lot better in the build-up play and sort of in that near final third space of, are we getting enough people in the right places? Are we moving well? Are we combining well? I thought they looked pretty solid there, and they've struggled there before. They definitely still had the same kind of struggle of like, can we get the final pass that unlocks the chance? Obviously, if you have an XG of 0.9 and you scored 1 goal, it's not like you were overflowing with chances with that kind of an XG. So it's like, they were not producing dangerous chances, but I do think they were producing pretty high quality attacking possession. And so sort of if you're taking baby steps of can we at least get into their half? Can we at least then build into the final third? Then can we create chances? They weren't necessarily creating those chances, but I think they were doing a lot of the first steps that you want to see. And, they didn't have dangerous necessarily like set pieces and stuff like that yet too, which is something they'll need if they're going to knock off a team like TCU. One thing that absolutely sticks out about what the Gophers did in Baylor is once again they continued that trend that happened all last year, which is incredibly lean bench usage. Incredibly lean. So 3 bench players, which is, having only 3 is pretty lean, but even on top of that, total bench minutes for the Gophers against Baylor, only 79 total bench minutes, which is just I can't say enough.
Just over about 20-ish minutes per player for everybody who's listening.
And I know folks probably follow the pro game and follow national teams and things like that. I really cannot say enough how very on the extreme 79 bench minutes is for a college program of like the first game of a weekend. That's very, very lean. And so for Minnesota in particular, if you're a Gopher fan, that means, we didn't see Abby Franson see any time on the field. We didn't see Sadie Harper. We had heard that she was going to be fresh and able to go in Texas. So maybe she was still, let's give that a benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was still recovering. So maybe we'll see her today. But even outside of that, Izzy Brown off the bench, Krista Van Loon off the bench, forwards. And normally you see the most rotation on that forward line because you really need them to have that quick burst. They only played, 20, 30 minutes each. And I think another place where we saw it, I mentioned in my season preview, holding mid was a place where maybe they had some depth with. Lauren Donovan was just a stud as a freshman, just looked like a junior out there from minute 1. She went 90 minutes. I think you did start to see at the end of the game, like maybe she was a little worn down from covering so much ground as that sole holding midfielder, that 6. So I'm curious to see if we see more reaction, but one thing I made a sort of a big claim in my season recap last year, Danny, is, I think one positive of subbing that people don't think of a lot is just to change stuff up in general. Not even do you have a quality sub? Do they do great things? Do they do certain things? Just that they do anything different than the starters is a thing I think people discount of changing the run of the game. In this case, I think the Gophers sort of had the run of the game, and they had the more traditional drawback of not subbing, which is they looked a little tired. And so talk a little bit about sort of that challenge of how do you go a little deeper into your bench, even if you're quote unquote risking the, quality of the player or whatever. But then, so those two dynamics of keeping people fresh versus who's on the field, that's a sort of a tag team, like a fighting dynamic. But then also the dynamic of how do you change the run of play in a game where maybe you've gotten yourself into a defensive end and you need to just like mix shit up?
Yeah, there's so many levels to this question. So I'm going to try to dive into this a little bit just to and make it really like digestible for everybody. But I do think, because you kind of took us on to get to your question, you took us on this journey through the season in context of last season. And I think that that's really appropriate for everybody to understand. The way that Minnesota is trying to play here is really indicative of the way that Aaron is coming in and trying to coach, right? So with the changing the formation to a 4-4-2, as you and I spoke about, that is inherently a little bit more of a, don't want to call it like a sit back, but it is not going to be a high press, because if you think about it, 2 forwards against 4 backs, they're never going to have the game in there. That's, they're already way more outnumbered, where if you're playing in a 4-3-3, you're almost one-on-one, in every against that back line. So you can push a little bit higher. You can sacrifice people behind you. In a 4-4-2, you can't really do that. You really have to keep it to one side of the field, which actually does cut down on the running that is placed on your players, because you can kind of keep the game in front of you and read it a little bit more. Having said that, it is not going to be like a win the ball and go forward, so it is much more of a chess match here, where you're not trying to throw it forward and go score and things like that. So you mentioned it when you're, I think that again, you took us on this journey in your question. You mentioned it in that there wasn't as many shots. There wasn't as many, there wasn't as many dangerous opportunities that we are seeing Minnesota create. And I think that is showing what they're focusing on is trying to keep the ball, a little bit more of a possession style, chess match. Let's have the ball. We can work it around and go forward when we see the opportunities.
Right.
That then translates, I think, then into her substitution mentality. So again, the layers of this, right? I think that style of play translates into the substitutions where you don't maybe have to use as many subs because you're not putting as many miles on each person's leg or as much load on each person's leg, like from the get-go. But those miles pile up if you don't use the subs come later end of the season, right? So at the beginning of the season, maybe it's not as big of a deal. I think it will start to add up, though, come the end of the season or midway through the season when everybody's just tired of traveling, right? And then on top of that, I think that when they aren't creating as many opportunities, like what you said, you know, she's either doing one of two things in my mind. She's either saying, I'm letting my players figure it out, right? Like I'm going to let them sort it out on the field. I don't want to make subs right now. We don't need to do that. So I'm letting them sort it out. Or she's kind of getting them ready for it. These are the amount of miles you're going to be putting on. So we're getting you ready for it. Right. So there's two things there and I don't know which one it will be yet, but that's kind of my thought process of watching and seeing her go through it.
And I do think in fairness to sort of the choices that are being made in terms of the rotation, there are some players on this Gopher squad who just naturally can give you 90 minutes. Like there are players who have that level of fitness and don't. Like there is a natural type of like, what does your body provide? What kind of fitness do you have? Like there are players on this roster who can pretty much go full tilt for 90 minutes because they just are Terminators. You know, like Sophia Bowman, Meg Gray, Lauren Donovan last year showed that she could. I think she looked a little tired at the very end of this game, but that's sort of like, well, yeah, it's the end of a game. You know, I think even like the Kenna Beismans of the world, she only played, 54 minutes last night, but she's actually shown that she can, when she's on, she can last those stretches. But so there are some players who can go 90, and that will just, if you have a few of those and then you don't sub your back line, that will narrow rotation. So in fairness, some of that, I think, strategically just will happen because you can keep a Sophia Bowman on the field and she just does not get tired. I mean, she just doesn't. You know, she could go run an ultra marathon and I feel like she'd be sprinting the whole time. She's just not human. Same with Meg Gray. You know, like these. But I think I think what we might need to see in a game like one other thing to the point of the pressing, I think there were moments in these exhibition games, even in a 4-4-2, where they showed some pressing ability. And I think what it looked like is Sophia Romine as the 10 sort of pushed up and sort of created a press shape that you sort of described that happens in a 4-3-3. So like she would press high because she has some good chaos factor in her game. And then you saw sort of Kaya Harper and Kenna Beisman as two forwards.
Tuck
then
in.
they either tuck in or they can go wide because Romine owns the center space. And so I think Minnesota will selectively press, and I think they're going to need to selectively press because it's frankly, when it works, it can create a really nice gimme opportunity offensively. And so even though it's higher risk, they're probably a team that's going to need to press. And so, like you said, in a 4-4-2, then what that means is you're going to either have to be selective or you're throwing your mids or you're doing something at a given point. And so we'll just have to see what that looks like. And I don't know, maybe a game against TCU is actually when you take those risks because it's like, well, we have to swing big, to get a result against the top team. Who knows?
So the risk with doing something like that, and I appreciate you pointing it out again, is that it has to come from the whole team stepping up together. When that happens, even the back line, all four have to be going up together. And so if the communication is even off a little bit, or you're two outside, you're two outside mids, then don't tuck in. Or one person gets played out, like one pass can kill that kind of a press where inherently if you're in a 4-3-3, again, because most other teams are doing that, it's like you already have it established behind you. So you can go a little bit more free. When you're not like that and everybody has to step up together, it really is which again is where I think you will see mistakes happen if people aren't on the same page the whole time through.
Well, and I think it's good that you point out, it's a salient point to bring up, like the risk is that then one pass can break you. I have some bad news for Minnesota fans. It will especially break you against TCU. TCU played Wisconsin in their opening match, also played to a draw, so that's good to know that they can be drawn out. But I don't know that I've ever seen a passing number like this. They had 84% pass percentage. Like
Whoa.
TCU can pass the hell out of the ball. They had 2/3 of possession in that game. Like they will just possess you to death, and they will pass you to death. Like 84% pass percentage is unreal. It might as well be 100. That might as well mean they never mess up a pass. Like that is crazy.
That is crazy.
And it's a credit to Wisconsin for coming away with a draw, because TCU produced 1.74 xG. That's a pretty high xG to come away scoreless. That means Wisconsin really did well. The other thing TCU did, which is why they'll be very fresh today, they had 7 core bench players in their rotation, all playing major minutes. So 30, 40, 50 minutes off the bench. Only one field player for TCU went 90 minutes. That is crazy. That is actually the craziest part. Using 7 or 8 subs is not crazy. But if you only have one field player go 90, that's bonkers.
Yeah, that is very unique. But again, I feel like that speaks to probably the style of soccer that they're trying to play. And for me, that this is the beginning of a season, and I think that coaches are establishing, here's what our team's going to be all about. Here's what my players are going to learn to expect from me. So TCU coach giving them, each of those players, that many minutes is like, I'm expecting something from you this season. Like you are going to be a part of this. And when I put you on, I want you to do something with it. You might not see that with Aaron. It's going to be like all of these players that I am giving these minutes from are the ones I'm going to be really expecting big things from.
Right. Well, and talk about, so for Minnesota, I think there's probably a couple different strategies you could go into. I think it's fairly clean to say, like, the underdog team on the road against a top-ranked opponent, I think you either do the thing where you play to win and you swing big, and you admit, like, yeah, we might give up a counter, like, but in order for us to put up a couple goals on TCU, we'll probably have to press, or you either do that version of the game, or I think a more common version of the game when you're playing a top opponent is stay disciplined, see if you get chances on a corner, see if you get chances on a random counter attack, like a mistake, but otherwise just like keep your shape. And it doesn't even mean that you're parking, but it might mean that you are being very, very intentional, and you're only going forward if you really have a wide open shot. So we'll see. I think it's probably more likely that latter strategy is what Minnesota does. I think me as an absurd person would love if they came in and just like high press, because I love some chaos press, obviously. But I think, talk about that as a player, and then of just having to be like so locked in, knowing that like if you mess up, they will find the precise pass at the precise moment, and they will break you. Talk about sort of what you have to do mentally to be up for a game like that.
Well, I think that going into this game, knowing especially that TCU is going to be a possession-oriented team like that, and is a top-ranked team, knowing that they can be dangerous and that they're they're going to be really confident on the ball. I'm sure everybody is saying yes. Like let's be super condensed and super disciplined. I like that word that you use, because I think that's exactly probably what they're saying, and that is coming from the back line, right? So all of that information, the rest of the team is going to react to what the back line is telling them to do, or you're holding mid is really going to tell you to do, right? Because that's going to be where that line of confrontation is coming from. If the back line is high and they're able to push everybody else up, maybe that's when you see your moment, or, when like their back line has their back turned, right? They're like, maybe for some reason, something goes wrong, a touch goes wrong, their back turned to the field. That's when you go, right? You find your moments to go. And when you see those, then everybody goes together. Otherwise it's like, if you go by yourself, you're just leaving everybody else kind of stranded behind you. So I think as a player, that the mentality going into it is, I need to be tucked. My mind is on my teammates today. It's not on like, can I what am I gonna, it's not even on so much like, what am I gonna bring to the game today? Am I gonna be creative? Am I gonna get this amount of crosses off or whatever, you know, like it's gonna be very much more, what's my teammate telling me to do today and how am I paired up with them?
Sort of just extra focus on like, okay, I always on my right, like, you know, if I'm Gabby Cesaroni, like I need to, E needs to be, you know, within 15 or 20 yards of me every second of this game. It's like
you're constantly head on a swivel. You're knowing where everybody is, exactly what you're just doing with your arms there. If she's going, then I'm tucking in, and if I'm going, then she's tucking in. You know, and it's constantly happening that way. And then if we win the ball, then we try to, you know, try to execute our game. But knowing that they have that level of possession, I think their mentality today probably is a lot more focused on defense.
Yeah, and I think what you probably will see today. Well, here are a couple things to look for as fans as the game starts. So, do we see Elizabeth Overberg at outside back again, which is really a defensive choice? You know, so her playing instead of Abby Franzen is, you're trying to maximize defense and you're just taking away a little bit of that verticality and that raw athleticism that Abby Franzen brings as like a, you know, just a 5'8", just athlete. I mean, she's just, you know, a winger type outside back who can defend well, but also can just feel so dangerous on the wing. Overberg is, you know, a holding mid center back type defender. So look for that. See if they switch that out. If they keep Overberg back there, if they start Franzen, it might be like a show of, we actually want to have a little bit of juice on the outside and see offensively. And then the other thing to look for is, do we see the Sadie Harpers of the world come in a little bit more? Do we see the forwards, you know, playing a little bit more minutes? Because the other thing you might see more from the Gophers that we didn't see in the Baylor game is those long balls from Delaney Stecker and Gabby Cesaroni at center back, who both can launch just really, really good, precise long balls and really long balls. Will you see them just attempt a few of those? Will we just see them sort of launch it and let Kenna Beisman run on? Will they launch it and let Kaya Harper, you know, bring some chaos in the final third?
Yeah.
Because I think when you're outmatched like this, especially in women's college soccer, you see a lot of those long balls. But Minnesota last year did a good job of balancing that. They weren't playing junk soccer. They were doing just enough of those long balls to keep the back line honest and then stretch the back line. I think you're going to see a few more of those because we saw basically none of them against Baylor. And you need at least sort of like 3 to 5, like 3 to 6 of those of just keep the center backs honest. Like, make sure that they know that a big freight train in Kenna Beisman might run right at them. You know, like just make them think about it.
Yeah, well, and I think the other part to it too is it's relief for the defense and the midfielders. Like honestly, there is a time when it's like, I just need to get this up the field. We need to get, you know, our feet back underneath us and let the forwards do a little bit of running for a second. You know, like let them chase it down and just give us like 20 yards. You know. Up the field. So sometimes there's that bit of relief too. But I do think that, you know, it's generally, I think at this level of soccer, not going to produce a ton of really dangerous opportunities. I think it's just going to, you know, maybe just push the play up a little bit more if they're really on their heels. You know, but I do think
it should never be your whole offense. It just needs to be one random thing you do, you know, every 12 minutes to be like, like you said, get the ball the hell out of here. And then also like, who knows, maybe someone runs on, maybe someone messes up.
Maybe we get, you know, maybe now we get a throw in up there where we can get the play field a little bit higher or something. So, you know, there's definitely some thought to it for sure. I do think you will see, you know, as this game goes on, this might be a really cool opportunity again for Erin to say, let's have our starting 11 come out, sort it out. Maybe we get our feet underneath us and everybody realizes, hey, we can actually play. We can hang with TCU. We've been able to do it with Baylor. Maybe we get a goal, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe we get scored on, but either way, now we can create some space for other players to come in and do exactly what you started with, where it's like, let's change some shit up now. Let's throw something new at them because we've been able to play with them. Right. So like, we know we got this now, or at least we have like some rhythm here. And now we can throw in like something a little bit more wild. So I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see. You know, I do think there's a lot of different ways that this game could go. I hope that we see a little bit more movement of players in the game. I do think
Mhm.
that will be helpful, especially players going back to back 90 minutes, 180 minutes on the weekend is just, that's going to be exhausting.
It's tough.
It's going to hit hard mid-season. And
It's
I
tough.
hope that doesn't lead to unfortunately that can lead to injuries. So we'll
Right.
see.
Well, and I think, it's worth, we've been talking a lot about what they can be doing better, like whether things were the right call, all those things. It's worth remembering a game against TCU, the way the RPI works, this game is a win for them, whether they get crushed or draw or win. The way the RPI works is playing this game actually just is a plus. When you play a top team, no matter what you get out of it, whether you gain experience or gain tactical knowledge or get actual points, it actually results wise is already a win the moment you schedule it. And so scheduling these games is good for a program like Minnesota because one, I've talked a lot about how they play up and down to competition. Well, here you go. Play up to competition. See if they can walk away with 2 draws, even 2 draws coming down for the start of this Texas Cup.
Oh, it's a win for sure.
If you would have told them that before they left on the trip, you take the draw against Baylor if you can get a draw against TCU. So if they can grind it out, if they can get a result, that would be huge. And so I think it is going to be interesting to see because this is the first time we've seen them have to do any adjustments, whatever. So, Dani, thank you you're on the road. I
have one thing to say to that really fast before we go. Is for everybody to understand the context of this again, these games are actually usually scheduled, these out of conference games are usually scheduled 3, 4, 5 years in advance, right? So this game has been on the books for sometimes 4 years. I don't know if that changed because of COVID, but when I was coaching in college, that was essentially it. I knew we were playing in 2026,
Right.
So there's the other part to that too, where this fell on a really good year for Minnesota playing TCU when TCU is doing a really high, is really highly ranked. And so, I hope that Minnesota comes away for if 2 draws on the weekend, even 1 draw and 1 loss, honestly, I think it's a really good, it's a good weekend for them overall. So we'll see.
And like you said, when teams schedule these, you don't know that TCU is going to be a top 10 team when you schedule it 4 years ago, the same way when this game got scheduled, maybe some of these games actually got tweaked once Aaron's came, but for sure, a giant chunk of the games were scheduled before she got here. And so, you schedule it literally with a different coach, let alone what the rankings are. So it's a nice peek behind the curtain. Dani, we are both on the road, just like the Gophers. We're trying to really put ourselves in the same mindset. We're ready to go like them. So everyone, noon Central kickoff. Look forward to how it goes. Dani, thanks so much for joining again.
Thanks for having me.
All right. See ya.